What happens when Hollywood royalty meets British television reality and refuses to play by the rules? When someone who's used to getting their way suddenly finds themselves face to face with a host who won't back down? In just 37 seconds, a single comment about knowing what real struggle looks like would transform a routine chat show appearance into the most explosive television moment of the year, ending with security being called and a guest being escorted off set. This is the story of how Jane Moore took on Meghan Markle on Loose Women, and why sometimes standing your ground means showing someone the door. The studio lights were blazing hot that Tuesday morning as the Loose Women theme music faded and Jane Moore settled into her hosting chair. Beside her sat the familiar faces of the panel: Ruth Langsford with her perfectly styled blonde hair and knowing smile, Colleen Nolan radiating warmth in her bright floral dress, and Linda Robson fidgeting slightly with her notes, always the most nervous before big interviews. "Right then, ladies," Jane said during the commercial break, her voice carrying the authority that had made her one of Britain's most respected journalists. "Remember, we treat everyone the same here. Famous or not, royal or not, they get the same questions we'd ask anyone else." Ruth nodded approvingly. "That's what the viewers love about us, Jane. We're not going to fawn over anyone just because they've got a title." The floor manager held up his fingers, counting down. 5, 4, 3, 2. "Welcome back to Loose Women," Jane announced to the cameras, her professional smile firmly in place. "Now joining us today is someone who needs no introduction. She's an actress, a duchess, and someone who's never been afraid to speak her mind. Please welcome Meghan Markle." The studio audience erupted in polite applause as Meghan glided onto the set, wearing an expensive cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her smile was picture perfect, the kind that had been practiced in front of mirrors and media trainers for years. "Thank you so much for having me," Meghan said, settling into the guest chair with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this countless times before. "I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with you incredible women." "Lovely to have you," Jane replied, though there was something in her tone that suggested she was already taking measure of her guest. "Now, you're here to talk about your new charitable initiative, but I have to ask, how are you finding life back in the public eye after stepping away from royal duties?" Meghan's smile never wavered, but her eyes hardened slightly. "Well, Jane, I think it's important to understand that I never really stepped away from helping people. That's always been my mission, my calling, if you will. Some of us are just built differently, you know? We feel a responsibility to use our platform for good." Linda leaned forward, genuinely curious. "That's wonderful, Meghan. Can you tell us more about this new project?" "Of course," Meghan said, her voice taking on the rehearsed quality of someone who'd given this pitch many times before. "We're launching a global initiative to support women who've faced real adversity, women who've had to overcome genuine struggles, not just inconveniences." Ruth raised an eyebrow at that last comment, but said nothing. Colleen, ever the diplomatic one, smiled encouragingly. "That sounds like important work. What inspired you to focus on this particular cause?" Meghan straightened in her chair, her expression becoming more serious. "I think when you've experienced real hardship yourself, when you've had to fight for your place in the world, you understand what other women go through. Not everyone can relate to that level of struggle." Jane's pen stopped moving across her notepad. "Real hardship?" she repeated, her journalist instinct sensing something worth exploring. "Can you elaborate on that?" "Well," Meghan said, gesturing elegantly with manicured hands, "I think there's a difference between facing genuine challenges and just dealing with everyday problems that everyone has. Some of us have had to overcome systematic barriers, media persecution, institutional racism. We know what it's like to have the whole world against us." The studio fell quiet for a moment. Linda shifted uncomfortably in her seat, while Ruth's expression became increasingly skeptical. Jane set down her pen completely. "I see. And you feel that gives you a unique perspective?" "Absolutely," Meghan replied without hesitation. "When you've been through what I've been through, when you've had to rebuild your entire life from scratch, you understand resilience in a way that others simply cannot. It's about knowing what real struggle looks like." That was it. That was the moment. Jane Moore, who had spent decades interviewing everyone from prime ministers to pop stars, who had covered wars and natural disasters, who had worked her way up from local newspapers to national television through sheer determination and talent, felt something snap inside her chest. "Real struggle," Jane repeated slowly, her voice dangerously quiet. "Real struggle," Jane repeated slowly, her voice dangerously quiet. The other panelists exchanged glances, sensing the shift in atmosphere like animals before a storm. Meghan, oblivious to the change in temperature, continued. Exactly. I mean, not everyone has had to deal with the kind of scrutiny and pressure that comes with being in my position. The sacrifices I've made, the things I've given up for the greater good. Ruth Langsford cleared her throat gently. Well, I think many of our viewers would say they've faced their own challenges. Oh, of course, Meghan said with a dismissive wave. Everyone has problems. But there's a difference between problems and genuine persecution. When you're fighting against centuries-old institutions, when you're challenging the establishment itself, that's a different level entirely. Jane's jaw tightened. In the control room, the producer was frantically gesturing at the cameras, sensing they were about to witness television history. Let me ask you something, Jane said, her voice taking on the steely edge that had made her famous for not suffering fools. What would you say to a single mother working 3 jobs to keep a roof over her children's heads? Or to someone caring for elderly parents while trying to make ends meet? Are their struggles not real enough? That's not what I meant, Meghan replied, but her tone suggested she wasn't particularly concerned about the clarification. Of course those are challenges. I'm talking about being targeted on a global scale, having your every move scrutinized, being forced to give up everything you know. Everything you know? Jane's eyebrows shot up. You mean giving up acting to marry a prince and live in palaces? The audience was dead silent now. Colleen reached for her water glass with shaking hands. Linda looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Meghan's composure cracked slightly. It's more complicated than that, Jane. You wouldn't understand unless you've lived it. The isolation, the lack of support, having to navigate systems that weren't designed for people like me. People like you, Jane repeated, setting down her cards completely and turning to face her guest fully. And what kind of person is that, exactly? Someone who refuses to be silenced. Meghan shot back, her media training slipping as real emotion crept into her voice. Someone who won't just smile and wave and pretend everything is fine when it isn't. Someone willing to speak truth to power, no matter the cost. Jane laughed, but there was no humor in it. The cost? What cost exactly? Moving to a mansion in California? Landing multi-million-dollar deals with streaming services? Having the freedom to choose your own projects and causes? You have no idea what you're talking about, Meghan said, her voice rising slightly. The death threats, the racist attacks, the complete destruction of my privacy and peace of mind. Privacy? Jane's voice was incredulous now. Privacy? You've given interviews to every major media outlet. You've got a podcast, a Netflix series. You've written books and given speeches about your private life. What privacy exactly have you lost that you didn't choose to give up? Ruth tried to intervene. Perhaps we should. No, Jane said firmly, holding up a hand. I want to understand this. Because sitting here, talking to someone who married into the most privileged family in the world, who had every advantage, every opportunity, every door open for them, and hearing them talk about real struggle to women who are watching this show during their lunch break from jobs they hate because they need to pay rent, well, I find that fascinating. Meghan's cheeks flushed red. You don't know anything about my background, about what I had to overcome to get where I am. Actually, I do, Jane replied calmly, pulling out her research notes. I know you went to private school. I know you had successful careers in television and as a lifestyle blogger before you met Harry. I know you had the resources and connections to build a platform and a following. So please, enlighten me. What struggle are we talking about here that's so unique, so much more significant than what ordinary people face every day? The racism, Meghan said, her voice sharp now. The systematic attempts to tear me down because I didn't fit their mold. The way I was treated by the press, by the institution itself. Jane nodded slowly. And that was terrible, genuinely awful. No one should face racism or unfair treatment. But here's what I don't understand. You've turned that experience into a brand, haven't you? Into a career, into millions of dollars worth of opportunities. So at what point does surviving adversity become exploiting it? The studio was so quiet you could hear the cameras humming. Meghan's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. That's completely unfair, she finally managed. Is it? Jane pressed on, sensing weakness. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've monetized your pain quite successfully. And now you're here, talking to women who work for minimum wage, who struggle to pay for childcare, who can't afford to take time off when they're sick, and telling them they don't know what real struggle island? That is absolutely not what I said. Meghan snapped, her composure finally cracking completely. You're twisting my words, putting things in my mouth that I never said. Jane remained perfectly calm, which only seemed to infuriate her guest more. I'm quoting you directly. You said some people know what real struggle looks like and others don't. You said not everyone can relate to that level of struggle. Your words, not mine. You're taking them out of context. Meghan shot back, her voice getting higher. I was talking about my specific experiences, my particular challenges. Were you though? Jane asked, flipping through her notes with maddening composure. Because it sounded to me like you were dismissing the struggles of ordinary people as somehow lesser than yours. And I have to tell you, as someone who sits in this chair and talks to real people with real problems every single day, that doesn't sit well with me. Linda Robson finally found her voice. Perhaps we could move on to talking about the charity work. No, Meghan said sharply, surprising everyone. No, I want to address this. Jane, you clearly have some kind of agenda here. This is supposed to be a friendly chat show, not some kind of interrogation. Ruth Langsford's eyebrows shot up at the word interrogation, while Colleen looked absolutely mortified at the turn the interview had taken. Jane smiled, but it was the kind of smile that could freeze water. An agenda? My agenda is representing the women who watch this show, the women who get up at 5 in the morning to clean offices before going to their day jobs, the women who haven't seen their families for months because they're caring for sick relatives, the women who are choosing between heating and eating this winter. Those women, that's my agenda. And I support those women, Meghan said defensively. That's exactly what my charity work is about. Is it though? Jane pressed. Because your charity work seems to involve a lot of photo opportunities and very expensive galas where wealthy people congratulate each other for caring. When was the last time you actually sat down with an ordinary working mother and listened to her problems without a camera crew present? Meghan's face was now bright red. That's incredibly unfair and completely inaccurate. You don't know anything about my private charitable work. Private charitable work that somehow always ends up in the newspapers, Jane observed dryly. I'm not going to sit here and be attacked like this, Meghan said, starting to stand up from her chair. This is completely unprofessional. Sit down, Jane said firmly. You came on this show to promote yourself and your causes. The least you can do is answer the questions honestly instead of throwing a tantrum when someone doesn't fawn over you. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Colleen gasped audibly. Ruth covered her mouth with her hand. Linda looked like she might faint. Meghan slowly sat back down, but her eyes were blazing with fury. Excuse me? You heard me, Jane said calmly. For the last 10 minutes, you've been telling our viewers that their struggles aren't real struggles, that somehow your challenges are more significant than theirs. And when I called you out on it, your response was to try to storm off set rather than defend your position. That's not the behavior of someone who's faced real adversity. That's the behavior of someone who's never been told no. How dare you, Meghan hissed. You have no right to speak to me like that. Actually, I have every right, Jane replied evenly. This is my show. These are my viewers. And when someone comes on here and insults them, whether intentionally or not, it's my job to call it out. I did not insult anyone, Meghan said through gritted teeth. You said they don't know what real struggle looks like, Jane repeated for what felt like the 100th time. You said not everyone can relate to that level of struggle. You dismissed their problems as everyday inconveniences while elevating your own experiences as somehow more meaningful, more important, more worthy of attention and sympathy. That's not what I meant, and you know it, Meghan snarled. Then what did you mean? Jane asked simply. Explain it to me. Explain to our viewers. Make us understand how living in palaces and signing multi-million-dollar deals constitutes more of a struggle than working 2 jobs and still not being able to afford groceries. Meghan opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. For several long seconds, she said nothing at all. The silence stretched on until it became unbearable. I don't have to explain myself to you, she finally said, her voice cold and distant. I don't have to justify my experiences or my perspective to someone who clearly has no intention of listening. There it is, Jane said quietly, but loud enough for the microphones to pick up. When you can't answer the question, attack the questioner. When you can't defend your position, claim you're being persecuted. It's quite a pattern, isn't it? I'm done, Meghan announced, standing up abruptly and pulling off her microphone pack. This is harassment, pure and simple. I won't be subjected to this kind of treatment. Jane remained seated, perfectly composed. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. When faced with questions about her claims that ordinary people don't understand real struggle, our guest has chosen to leave rather than explain herself. I think that tells you everything you need to know. Meghan turned back, her eyes flashing with rage. "You sanctimonious, bitter woman. You're just jealous because I've actually made something of my life while you're stuck hosting a daytime chat show for housewives." The studio erupted. The audience gasped. Ruth's hand flew to her chest. Colleen looked absolutely scandalized. Linda appeared to be in shock, but Jane Moore just smiled. "And there's the real person underneath all that media training. Thank you for showing our viewers who you really are. Security will show you out." As if they'd been waiting for that exact cue, 2 security guards appeared at the edge of the set. Meghan looked around wildly, perhaps expecting someone to come to her defense, but found only shocked faces staring back at her. "This isn't over," she said as the guards approached. "Yes," Jane replied calmly. "It island goodbye, Meghan." And with that, the most explosive interview in Loose Women history came to an end, with cameras rolling until the very last second as Meghan Markle was escorted from the building, leaving behind a stunned studio and a host who had just reminded everyone why you don't mess with British television.